Okay, we're going to get started. I'm going to bang the hammer. I almost never have the hammer. Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday. Kim, you're all set. You can hear me, right? Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you. Today is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Welcome to the Beverly School Committee's Finance and Facility Subcommittee meeting. We are meeting in a hybrid remote model using a remote meeting application, which allows for remote participation and public access to the open portions of our meeting. Subcommittee meetings have none of those. BevCam is streaming and broadcasting our meeting tonight on Channel 6 and HD 1073. Thank you, BevCam. And we're allowed to do this because the governor said so, and then they said so multiple other times, but we don't have anybody remote today, and we don't need this functionality because everybody's here in person. So I'm not going to read the rest of this little script. In person, we have members of our FNF committee from the school committee. We have resident representation. We have a wonderful city councilor with us this evening, as well as our some administrators from the district. I will do a complete roll call to make sure BevCam can hear all of us. On the committee, on the FNF committee, Ms. Coelho.
Here.
Dr. Silva.
Here.
My resident reps, welcome, Matt. Matt Weaver.
Hi.
Fantastic. Mr. Manzo.
Here.
Mr. Dominic.
Here.
Mr. Rotundo.
Here.
Wonderful Ward 1 City Councilor. Thank you for being here. Miss Emma, Director of Finance.
Here.
Miss Brown, Executive Director of Operations. That sounds wonderful.
Here.
Dr. Trocek.
Here.
Superintendent of Schools. And Ms. Beleza. Beleza.
Yeah. Here.
Our Director of English Language. Is that really your title?
We're actually going to go through how it's shifting.
Oh,
So-
fantastic. Okay, fantastic. All right. And doing my Zoom things for me on technical support, actually, in the background is Ms. Abel. Thank you for doing that, Ms. Abel. Okay, I'm sharing on the screen our agenda for this evening. I'll make it a little bigger. Our very first item is meeting minutes. I'm going to share that. These are the meeting minutes. Everybody, you should have had your packet. I wish to say something for a minute. This is our first meeting with our first FNF with new people at various positions, including a new resident rep. And so things came to you in a lot of different emails, including a policy. And so we are working out the kinks to try to really send a packet on Friday so you have the weekend to look at everything. Please bear with us while we continue to work out those kinks. So these are the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion to accept them?
Motion.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Any comments or corrections on the meeting minutes? Okay, Mr. Weaver, we expect you would abstain because you were not here last time. All those in favor of accepting our meeting minutes? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-0. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, gifts to schools. I'm going to put that up on my screen. Again, the font is really small, so I'm trying to make it a little bigger. So we have a total amount of $10,930.15, and all of those funds are captured at the top of the file, and I'm showing that on the screen right now. Before we begin any discussion or ask any questions, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. A second? Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Any questions for any of the school administration on any of these amounts of money? Seeing none, I'm calling the roll. All those in favor of accepting with gratitude these gifts to schools? Mr. Weaver, you get to vote now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, the last vote was 5-0. I'm sorry, Ms. Coelho, because Mr. Weaver was not here at the last meeting, so he doesn't get to vote on the meeting minutes.
Oh, you know why it looks different? Because Emma's name is under there.
Oh. I don't think we give Emma a vote. So So should we be noting that she's voting? Should I be asking her to vote and noting it? No. Okay. I didn't think so either. I can ask Donna to fix that. She put it on the little form that we keep our meeting minutes on, that Ms. Coelho is so graciously doing for me, so I can try to just do one thing at a time instead of 10. All right, so that passes 6-0. Fantastic, and thank you to all the people who made these gifts to schools possible. Our next items are grants that we need to accept. And so let's look at the grants. That's gifts to schools, get out. Here are the grants. Again, I'll make it as big as I think I can so people can see it on the screen. Before we can ask administration any questions, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Second? Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Does anyone have any questions on the acceptance of these grants for administration? And Mr. Rotundo, even though I'm not calling on you to vote, we really do appreciate your being here, and you're certainly welcome to ask about these as well. That's all. No pressure or anything. I just didn't want you to feel left out. Okay, so I think I want to ask about the, all right, I'm going to call on myself because I didn't see anybody else's hands up. I want to ask about the Career and Tech Education Grant, the Perkins 5 grant. And I think we've had that before. And so maybe just a couple of comments about that and where do we think, maybe Dr. Cho, so maybe some for you, where do we think, are we expanding our After Darks this year or maintaining what we had last year? There's a lot of demand for After Dark and workforce readiness, so I thought we could talk about that a smidgen.
All right, so first of all, that's an entitlement grant, so, right, isn't that an entitlement for us? That's not a competitive, right?
It was competitive, but when they guaranteed.
Your mic.
Yeah.
When they made the initial award, they committed to it being a multi-year award. So this
Right.
is not the first year, and it's the continuation.
This isn't our Perkins, this isn't just our regular Perkins one?
Yeah,
419?
400.
No, they're talking 400. She was talking about 400.
Oh, okay, I'm
400 is a
sorry.
Perkins grant, right?
Yes.
And that's an entitlement.
Yes.
So that's an entitlement grant, and that supports a lot of the work that gets done at the high school. And it's, I think it's overseen by Jerry Shaw? Is that, yeah, so Jerry Shaw, who is our, Mark, help me with this, what does he teach? He teaches engineering. It used to be Megan Sudak that oversaw it. We utilize that for the programs that we have in our school, like culinary or some of the engineering, some of those sort of things. DECA, did you say?
Okay, so
All
for
those.
people
So those
watching
are-
at home, we now have 2 extra people in the room. Principal Mark Thomas from our high school and Assistant Superintendent Flaherty. So the phone a friend is happening in the background.
That's a grant that we've had for years, and we
Okay.
utilize it in a lot of different ways to support those programs. That's not specific to After Dark.
Okay,
We are applying for additional funding for After Dark that would support any more After Dark if we were to have more students go or any of those things. That's not due until October, though, so that process is still undergoing. And then, did you ask about another one there?
no, that was a very convoluted question about that one.
Yes.
That's
Yep.
okay. All right, anybody else have any questions? Yes, Mr. Manzo?
Since you started on answering the question, so the 419 grant, so it sounds like it's a
Yep.
similar thing.
Microphone, is your mic on?
You need your microphone.
419 grant.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm going to speak to that in the next meeting. Actually, Mark is going to. Julie Ferrara and Mark have done a lot of work. We had the planning grant for this last year, which led up to our application for this, and this is a larger grant that we just received within the last year. And it's going to support some of the career pathway work that we're doing, but there'll be more information at the next meeting if you want to tune in and learn more. All right.
I'll ask the question that I expected Mr. Manzo to ask, that he often asks, which is that if we take 419, then is it likely that 419 will be renewed, or will we then be on the hook to make up that money in our budget a year from now?
So the way that we're so whether or not there's a continuation, and there often is, we would always continue to apply for continuation, but the purpose of that is to set our pathways in motion. And so it's something that would be less recurring costs and more how we get it up and running. Is that a good answer, Ron? Thank you. You'll learn more. Hold on for an hour and a half and you'll have a whole presentation on it.
I understand that to be true, but you're asking this group first to vote to accept it. So we're a little what is this one? Cart and horse?
Cart before the horse, horse
Yeah.
before, yes. So-
Okay, there's no cats
Yeah.
in there. Sorry, my bad. All right, there's a motion on the table.
Carts.
All those in favor of accepting these grants? That passes 6-0. Okay, the next thing on our agenda are budget transfers, and we have two different transfers. So the first one is on the screen. It is number 2263. Again, this was in your packet. It's kind of really too much to kind of scroll through here on the screen. Multiple pages of budget transfers. Before we can potentially ask Ms. Emma any questions about this, I'm looking for a motion to accept this batch of budget transfers.
So moved.
Okay, tie. Mr. Manzo, the tie goes to the runner. That's you today. And thank you for the second, Ms. Coelho. That being said, anyone at the table have any questions for Ms. Emma on this particular batch of budget transfers early in the school year? Yes, Mr. Manzo.
So if you could just summarize what these transfers are doing. I think they're all sort of heading in one direction, but maybe it'd be good to hear you describe it.
Absolutely. So these were both from the end of last fiscal year as we closed out our budget, went through our reconciliation process to make sure that all of our funds had been expended. We, go through and over the course of the year, we make quarterly budget transfers to the health insurance trust fund that's held on the town side or the city side. And then at the end of the year, we just do a little cleanup, reconcile, make sure that we have made all of our contributions. And so this was just clearing out some of those small overages or deficits that were left over in accounts to put there to help then close out the health insurance budget is the first one. And then the second one was, again, just some end of year small deficits and surpluses closing out to make sure that all of our accounts were zero as we concluded the year.
Okay.
And so did we have a big hole in the health insurance line, bigger than usual, or is this business as usual?
This is business as usual. Every year we go through the process of budgeting health insurance, both in our appropriation and also in our revolving funds. And then we make our, at the beginning of the year, we go through, we do an allocation to our revolving funds based on where we think staff salaries will actually be allocated. And as we move through the year, and those things sort of shake out at the end of the year, we just sort of clean that up and make sure that we're not charging health insurance for staff who are paid out of the appropriation from a revolving fund.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I only brought the first budget transfer forward. I thought we would vote on them separately, so I appreciate you, overachiever. Okay, any other questions on budget transfer, the first budget transfer? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, that passes 6-0. There's a second budget transfer in your packet, number 2295. You just heard Miss Emma speak to this one. It's definitely shorter than the other ones. Before we ask any questions, I'm looking for a motion to accept this budget transfer.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Mr. Dom. Anybody have any questions for Emma on this particular budget transfer? Okay, I'm going to call on myself. And this is maybe a question for a bigger conversation, maybe at the next meeting. I see that a decent chunk of this money is being transferred into HVAC repairs. And I believe that we, as a school district, still do not have an HVAC person. True or false? True. So we've had that position posted for a while now, right? I wonder how much more we're paying when we have to continue to go out and try to get somebody and then pay them a contracting fee versus what we would be paying if we could get somebody on staff. So, Mr. Rotundo, a question for you. Do you know if the city has an HVAC person yet?
There are a lot of positions empty, and I believe that might be one of them. I don't even know if HVAC is actually one of the positions. I know electrical, plumbing, so I don't know necessarily. There's a lot of positions open right now.
Right, because a couple of years ago, we had a jack of all trades retire at the city level, right? And he was doing a lot of different things. So I think we're still, quote unquote, hurting from that retirement. Whoever that person was, if they're listening, we miss you. So I don't know, maybe we want to look at that, especially as we head into next year's budget. If that's really cranking on us, maybe we need to change the job description or think about something else we could do to try to really incent somebody to fill that position, because it might save us money. So that's just a general comment. All right. Any more questions on this particular budget transfer? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of this budget transfer? That passes 6-0. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're cruising right along. Hold, please. Coming back to the agenda. Our next item, for those of you who were here last year, you'll remember that we have student activity accounts, and Jean brought to us an update of the list of them and said every year there's going to be some turnover, and every year we should be approving the new ones and then retiring some and approving the new list. So the next two items on our agenda are exactly that. There's a new student activity account. And so I'm putting this on my screen. BHS wants a spring musical activity account. And I'm looking for a motion to accept this activity account.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Mr. Manzo. So I'll say another half a second, and then admin, if you want to say anything more. Basically, the activity accounts are very directed bank accounts. So children raise money, or maybe staff raises money for a very specific reason. The money goes into that account, and it just helps us keep the money separate from everything else. And then the monies can only be spent on that particular activity. So we have a number of them. You'll see that list on the next motion. But this is a new one specifically for the spring musical. So having said that, does anybody have any questions for administration on this particular new additional student activity account? Seeing none, motion's on the table. All those in favor? That passes 6-0. Next item is approval of all the totality of the list. This list was in your packet, but it's on your screen right now. I'll try to make it big enough that we can see all of them, but none of them scroll off the screen. It would be a little easier to do if I had my mouse with me and or I wasn't over caffeinated. However, neither of those things are true. So here's the list of our current student activity accounts heading into the 24-25 school year. I'm looking for a motion to approve and accept this set of student activity accounts.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Any questions for administration on this set of activity accounts?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Dom.
So for the accounts here, this is just that these will be the accounts for this year, and we're approving that and not the actual funds that will go into them yet. Is that correct?
Correct. So these are already established student activity funds related to perhaps student travel or AP test fees or clubs, things of that nature. So these are just the annual recognition. In the event that a club ceases to exist, there is a formal procedure that within 3 years, they do need to then pull that off the books. So you will see on there, right, there's still the class of 2024 on that list. Over the course of this year, they will go through the process of liquidating any funds, going through that process. But this is so that the annual recognition and acceptance, these would have all come before the committee in the past for their initial approval.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, motion on the table. All those in favor? That passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is policy D as in David, J as in John, E as in Edward. This is our procurement policy, and I realize I did not do a very good job of editing it. And again, if you were here last year, at the end of last year, we reviewed this policy, and we talked about the fact that as soon as Jean retired, we would have to update this policy, and we talked about why can't we just say our business manager has right to buy things for our school system, and in fact, the way our charter is formulated, our charter says the mayor is allowed to delegate purchasing capabilities to a named individual. So that named individual is our director of finance, and it had been Jean, and so this policy is in front of us so that we can change Jean's name to Emma's name, and I only did that in one place in the file. Haste makes waste. So I will ask for a motion to accept this, and then I'll accept an amendment to further edit it. Motion to accept this change to policy DJE, please.
Motion to accept.
Thank you,
Second.
Dr. Silva. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Would anyone like to make the amendment that I should change the second instance of Ms. Sherburne to Ms. Puglisi? Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Friendly amendment. Anybody want to second that friendly amendment?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland, which I will continue to flip your name around. Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions on this particular policy and the updating of this policy? As amended? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 6-0 as amended. Ms. Coelho, can you make a scribbly little note on your F&F meeting minutes notes that I need to make that second update? Whew. Okay. The next thing on our agenda is the Building and Grounds report. And Mr. Weaver, especially for you, I will say that we get these reports and our meetings tend to be a little crunch for time. We did extend our meetings by 15 minutes this year, but we tend to not talk directly about this report. Rather, if we have things in it that are alarming to us, we can email administration ahead of time, and maybe they bring responses to us, so we get to hear about that. That said, I think we're cruising along pretty well here. If anybody has any concerns about the B&G report, I can put it on the screen, sorry. I think I can put it on the screen. It is in a Word file. I'm not sharing the Word file, so I'm not going to put it on the screen. I apologize, because I didn't do the right thing in Zoom. Does anybody have any real big concerns that they want to bring forward at this time about the B&G report? Yes, Mr. Manzo.
Not a concern, but just I'm impressed as always, the amount of work that this group does every summer to get the buildings ready for school to begin every September. And so thank you to the B&G staff and everyone who's put that effort in.
Absolutely. I think we can second that all the way around. Okay, and then as we move forward, I'll just remind everybody, our goal is to get that report out on Friday, so you have the weekend to look at it and then maybe email your questions to administration. Sometimes we don't get it from B&G in a timely fashion, so there are going to be times that you might not get that B&G report until Monday, but we do our best to send it out on Friday. Okay, next. Dun. Ms. Brown, would you like to be your own Vanna, or would you like me to next through your slides while you just talk?
You can be my Vanna if you don't mind.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director of Operations report and update. And I guess maybe I should say a little segue here. In previous years, Ms. Sherburne held really two titles, the Director of Operations and the Director of Finance. And so we had one person on quote unquote over there on the other side. And now we have two. And so there's a separation of duties. And so that's for people who have been here before, if you didn't necessarily notice that, I'm spelling it out for you. And Mr. Weaver, this is your first time here. There's a separation over there. And so Ms. Brown will be giving us this report, whereas if you had maybe watched any of our fun meetings in the past, you would have seen, quote unquote, just Jean over there. And later, when we talk about the actual beans, when we talk about the revenues and expenses, we'll get to hear from Ms. Puglisi. Okay, you just let me know when you want me to go.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind forwarding to the agenda on the next
Okay, here we go.
Green. So Emma and I are excited to work together as a team and to work with all of you. We have big shoes to fill, we know that, with Jean retiring, but are looking forward to the opportunity with all of you. So tonight, in terms of our agenda, you can see there, we're going to be talking, I'll talk briefly about kind of educating all of our students and what that means, kind of taking the money that you guys certainly are in charge of, and we'll listen to Emma and her reports and kind of just what is our budgeting, what does that look like in real time, in action in our schools. Jean did that in the past, if you remember when, we had the cafeterias done at the elementary school, she would share pictures and so forth. So just kind of talking to you about the financial pieces and what it looks like in action in our schools. With that being said, we're going to have a playground improvement update and kind of talk to you a little bit about that tonight. We're going to have a program highlight tonight from our L program, where Ms. Beleza will be sharing that with you. And then Emma will come back with a cost calculations discussion, as well as any other financial reporting, if she has any at the end. So kind of thinking about, if you wouldn't mind going back back a little bit, just for a minute. No, that's okay. If you look at this graphic on the left, it talks about belonging, and our focus in this district is just that. We're a student-centered budget, we're a student-centered district, and we're really looking at how do we create that sense of belonging, where students are not only seen, but heard and really valued in our community, all pieces of our community. And so that is certainly a focus of ours, and that's why, we want to bring different groups together to these meetings to share with you information about all the different aspects of our community. So in particular, tonight we'll be looking at our EL programming and all the amazing parts and wonderful things they bring to our community, and some information about the population and their needs and how we support those needs financially and otherwise. And then looking at how we're creating belonging for that group of students in our community. The other thing that we'd like to talk about is just our grants and what does that look like in terms of implementation in our district. So we will start with the Ayers Elementary School, so I'll say next. In terms of that, our ESSER funding helps support the replacement of the playground, and you can see the beautiful pictures there. It opened just this school year. They finished it, and it opened this year for the students there. And it's beautiful, wonderful new play structure for them. They had a kindergarten play structure added last year, and then this one was completed this summer. Well, it's almost completed, I should say. They still have a patio and 2 cement pads that'll be going in there, and I believe they're going to be moving some of their picnic tables to those areas. They're on just the other side of these pictures. So thinking about that, this is just, an amazing way for the students there. Their play structure really was in need of replacement. Mr. Shiroli, who is Director of Buildings and Grounds, did a report about a year and a half ago on just capital improvements and looking at moving forward how that might look for our playgrounds across the district. He was looking at the wear and tear on the various playgrounds. So whether it's, if we're going in every other year, if we could possibly look at that as improvements, that would be great, and kind of just analyzing the playgrounds each year to see what the needs are. So one of the things you can see on the bottom, the principal, Megan Hart, came to school committee last year and asked about the naming of this playground, this dedication to Robert King, who was a longtime custodian and really integral member of the Ayers community. And so on the slides I sent this weekend, it said the dedication will be the week of October 10th. It actually is going to be on October 15th at 2:15. So just wanted to share that with you, and everyone's invited to that and come share that wonderful dedication ceremony on the Ayers Playground.
This is a great opportunity to remind everybody across the district that we do have a naming policy. And so it was fantastic that we had the Ayers principal come to us and ask, and there's a whole procedure around that, how much time you have to wait to give other people a chance to suggest an alternative name. And so just a little reminder, because I think that we have a lot of policies that people don't necessarily know about.
Absolutely. And so this was funded with both PTO funds and through the ESSER funding. So thank you to the PTO there as well. So That's a little bit on that. The next slide talks about the Playful Learning Grant. You can see a couple of the enhancements that were installed this summer at the Hannah Elementary School and the McEwen Preschool. The chimes, and then down below, those are chalkboards, flower chalkboards. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit. They were enhancements, but I figured I'd tell you a little bit about the Playful Learning Grant. Gabrielle Montevecchi, the principal at Hannah Elementary, applied for a pilot grant with DESE last year, and they received the grant. So if you wouldn't mind going forward to the next slide. The Playful Learning Grant, there are many components to it, but it's really looking at strategies that integrate playful learning techniques throughout the day for students. It's a pre-K through 3 grant, and it's looking at how you motivate and engage children in learning. There's a lot of choice and voice for students in not only how they show their learning, but what learning they're interested in and how they learn in the classroom. So it takes centers and moves it to this idea of studios, and there's a lot of voice and choice for students. And so a part of the grant was the enhancements at the playgrounds for these 2 schools. If you move to the next slide, we were one of 5 districts that were awarded the grant across the state. The first year was $68,000, and it included curriculum, professional development for the staff through coaching, consumables because the centers required art supplies and different supplies in them for the students to be able to create with, and then also the playground equipment. There is a year 2 to the grant. I'm not sure yet what that award will be.
It's been submitted, but we don't.
Right. And so I know year 2 of that will be more in-depth coaching for pilot staff members in both McEwen and at Hannah. So just some additional updates to our playgrounds and giving you a little context around them. And they sound wonderful because we have them at the preschool, and you can hear the children playing the music on the chimes every day. So it's wonderful to hear. So moving forward, as I said earlier, kind of looking at different parts of our community and sharing information about them. So we have Caitlin Beleza here today, our Director of Multilingual Learners, and changing her title, which she'll tell you a little bit about, but really looking at this is part of our community. This is who we are in Beverly, and sharing a little bit about that with you, the population and what that looks like. Last spring, we came to you after the budget season to ask for an additional FTE because it was really looking necessary for us in order to meet the needs of this part of our community. And so that's why we have Caitlin here today to share a little bit about that. And again, a little bit about how we foster belonging in our community in this group. So turn it over to Caitlin.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Thank you, FNF Committee, for the opportunity to provide some beginning of the year updates. I typically start with some kind of terminology. Our program has so many acronyms, they change every year. So it seemed like a good place to kind of ground ourselves, especially in that sense of belonging. So our program has been the English Learner Education Program. It's the ELE program. It's now broadening to the Multilingual Learner Education Program. So I wanted to start with just a little why. Why are we making this shift? It's not unique to Beverly. It's happening across the state. It's happening across the country. Massachusetts is part of a consortium called WIDA, along with 41 other states. And so in being part of this consortium, we have adopted the WIDA 2020 frameworks as our standards. And we also use the access test, which is equivalent to MCAS, if you will, for looking at language growth for English learners year to year. So with the WIDA 2020 frameworks came this shift to multilingual learners. It's really more asset-based. It's an umbrella term that houses a variety of different profiles of students who are coming from really language diverse families. So in the beginning guidance pages from the state are these kind of 2 left and right panels of the slide. So on the left is the definition of who are multilingual learners. And so they're saying they're students who have been or consistently are exposed to more than one language. It's an inclusive term. Again, think of it as an umbrella. So under that falls our English learners, it's our former English learners, Students whose first language is not English, so those are students who are growing up in a home where other languages are spoken. We typically will be testing them for our program, but they do not qualify, but they're still multilingual learners. And heritage language learners, those are children who might be growing up in a home where English is the dominant primary language, but they're learning the language of grandparents or extended family in addition to it. So again, a much more asset-based, broad terminology for our students. On the right-hand side, I did want to highlight the connection of this shift to DESE's vision for all of our students here in Massachusetts. So in using this language, we're really looking at promoting culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. The culturally sustaining, culturally responsive has been in our vocabulary for quite some time. The linguistically sustaining is really a new emphasis, not a new idea, but really an emphasis at the state level. How are we really embracing and honoring what our students are bringing to our schools and our greater community? The second part of that just being that within the DESE's commitment that all students are known and valued by respecting and honoring what they bring to the school community. So again, thinking about what it is that we're doing in our schools and our bigger city community to really embrace our families and our students. I do use the terms kind of interchangeably. I'm still settling into multilingual learner. It's a mouthful. The state is going to continue using English learner though, and English learner education program for the specific services that our ESL teachers are providing to our students who qualify for a program. It's tied to state and federal funding. They don't want to lose sight of the fact that within this broader multilingual learner umbrella, this particular group has significant needs in terms of whole child approach, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, of just what are all the factors that we're looking at in our schools and community to make sure our students are set up for achievement. Thank you. All right, so looking at our population changes, I've had the privilege to be here for quite a few years now. I was the second elementary teacher when all of our little elementary L's were at Ayers, and there were two of us. We had one middle school and one high school teacher. Over the course of the past 5 years, we've had quite a significant change from the 10 years before that when I was here. But really, if you look kind of post-COVID, so if we're looking at 2022 on, we have continued to see growth in our program year over year. This is coming out of the October SIMS data, so what we are certifying to the state of the students who are enrolled as English learners in October year over year. So in 2022, we had 165 students, which had declined. So again, thinking about the environment of the movement coming in and out of the country, 2019 into 20 into 21, with everything with the pandemic, we did see a decrease in students. We saw a lot of in-state movement, and then 2022, we really settled down again. We were up at 232 students at the beginning of last school year. I do want to draw attention, and I apologize, that graphic on the bottom corner is small. But something that's interesting here, thank you. So our overall percentage of students K through 12 who are English learners in the district is 5.2. We always hovered around 3 when I first started, 3.5 we were growing, and now we just continue to grow. Of that group, of those 232 students, 29.5% of them are in years 1 and 2. And I just want to bring some attention to that as we go through a little bit further of what happens in the instruction our students are receiving, what are we looking at in that belonging piece. It's a significant number for us. We're a mid-incidence district in the state. It means we have over 100 students, and then the next cap is significantly higher. That mid to high is a very wide range. But having almost 30% of our students in those first 2 years means that what we're doing in our ESL classrooms, what we're doing in our grade level and content classrooms, and with everyone else who is touching their day-to-day lives, our nurses, adjustment counselors, administrators, it's a significant shared responsibility that we have across the district. So thinking about where we are right now, if you don't mind zooming back out again, just to where we're kind of projecting. When we opened, we had 211 students, K-12, who were sitting on our roster as returning Ls. In the midst of screening brand new students and enrolling transfer students, we're currently at 265 students, and we still have another week, 2-3 weeks before we certify SIMS. So if we continue at the rate that we typically have been enrolling students, we will likely see 275, upwards of almost 300 students this year, which again is significant. Coming into this role 4 years ago, we are just hitting 200 students in our program. So we have continued to grow year over year. Oh, that's okay. Perfect. Thank you. There you go. You're doing great. I really appreciate it. So within the increase in students, there's also been a lot of changes to the students themselves, their family units and everything they're bringing to our community. And so some of the things that we've noticed, again, thinking really in those years that were on the previous slide, so the past 4 or 5 years, the countries of origin, where are our students coming from? We're still primarily a district where most of our students are born here in the United States. That's followed by students who were born in Brazil, Guatemala, Afghanistan, Albania, the Dominican. We have many, many countries represented in our student group. Our native languages, it's changed, again, since the time I've been here. Certainly Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, Albanian are our top languages. We are seeing more students speaking Arabic in our schools, as well as an increase this particular school year of Haitian Creole coming into our school at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. Within the dynamic language profiles, I just want to bring light to, again, that multilingual learner. Our students aren't second language learners in many cases anymore. They're third, fourth, fifth language learners. We have students who are coming in who are speaking Haitian Creole, Spanish, Portuguese, maybe some French, and now they're learning English. So there's a lot of really beautiful stuff that is happening outside of our schools that we're trying to capture and really bring in and shine light on, again, throughout preschool even, where we're starting to identify students through our high school. The journeys are different. Again, most of our students are born in the U.S., but those who are not have had varying journeys here to Beverly, which may entail multiple countries that they traveled through. It may have entailed coming directly to Massachusetts, but not to Beverly first. Within those first 1 to 2 years, many of our students who are new to our Beverly schools have experienced significant challenges. They've had, in some cases, traumatic experiences. With that being said, they are incredibly resilient, and they bring a lot of value to the conversation, to the activities, and to the greater community that we have, even with the challenges and struggles that they face. They are so excited to be here and be part of the Beverly Public Schools. In terms of language and literacy proficiency, we have students, again, thinking of that kind of newcomer or year 1 or 2 here in the U.S., who are proficient in their first language. I think a lot about our upper middle school and high school students. They're reading and writing just like any other 15, 16-year-old in Brazil, Guatemala, wherever their home country is. We also have students, though, who are 15 and 16 and who are not literate in their first language. So that at upper middle school and high school presents itself with some additional considerations for how are we providing instruction that is meeting and filling the gaps while also providing access to grade level content, so we're not exacerbating gaps over time for students. So it's a lot of that MTSS, that multi-tiered system of support, who else is tiled into and part of the system to support our students. The complex learning profiles, so again, thinking about learning differences versus a disability. What is full-time school, never missing any years of school in one country? How is that experience similar to and or different from what we would expect from someone at that greater age here in Beverly, here in Massachusetts? We do have quite a few students coming into our district who are already on IEP. So those students in Massachusetts choose different terms. They use dually identified as well as LSWD. It's ELSWD, Ls with disabilities. So just thinking about what are the resources that we have historically had available and what do we need to now have available to accommodate not necessarily Beverly identifying more students, but students coming to us already with services identified. And we have many older students coming in, kids coming in at 16, 17, 18. Credits may or may not be transferring. They may or may not have any level of English as they're entering. So what does that mean for our schools? And last one, just thinking about our external factors. So outside of our school walls, what is life like for our students? Are their basic needs met? What are the family unit stability and work stability for their families, and then for the older students for themselves look like? So lots of things happening. Again, when our students are here, they're excited to be here, and they really do want to be part of the community. So that's that bigger effort on, as part of the team of how are we meeting these needs so the students feel like they are welcomed and do belong. Forward news through. So really quickly, I have kind of gone through this, but again, thinking about how we all work together, there are 3 approved models of instruction for multilingual learners in Massachusetts. Beverly has adopted and all the years I've been here, we've used the Sheltered English Immersion, or SEI program, and that means that we have our SEI endorsed content teachers. Those are your grade level teachers in elementary school, and then your content teachers 7 through 12, who are teaching our English learners in their gen ed classrooms. Then you have your licensed ESL teachers, who are that ESL arm, who are providing that explicit, sustained, and systematic language instruction to our English learners throughout their day. Okay? So I do want to go through, if you don't mind scrolling down, what the guidelines look like. And it's important to go into these again, thinking about how our population has changed and what the needs are and how we have met them over the years, to kind of break it down. So I know there's a lot going on. I'll kind of take us from the top through each piece of it. So the numbers and the corresponding little colored rectangular boxes with words are the WIDA English proficiency levels. So it's a scale from 1 to 6. Students at a level 1 are those who are entering. That's your newcomer, your lowest level of English language proficiency as a second or multi-language. Level 6 is that you're equivalent to a native English-speaking peer. You really hit all of the criteria to be performing at the level of whomever is in your grade level. Here in Massachusetts, they have broken down those 6 into 2 categories. So levels 1 and 2 are the foundational levels, and then 3 and 4 are transitional levels. I do want to point out too, within them, it's not just a flat level 1. There are 10th of a level increment. So it's a 1 to a 1.9, a 2 to a 2.9, and so forth. So in Massachusetts, our guidance is that students who are at those foundational levels, so levels 1 and 2, should be receiving at least 2 to 3 45-minute periods of ESL by a licensed ESL instructor daily. In some cases, certainly at the high school where we have an alternating schedule, we look at over the course of the week, and that's really our intermediate students are the only ones who are impacted by this. Are they meeting the minutes? And they certainly are meeting those instructional minutes over the course of the week. All of our other levels are newcomer and emerging levels, so that year 2 at the high school, and then all through middle and back down to elementary, they are receiving daily ESL instruction. Those students in transitional, so levels 3, 4, sometimes even 5, if they haven't exited our program, they're expected to have at least one 45-minute block a day taught by a licensed ESL teacher. So I did put in gray right now, and I have the little plus because we're still screening students, welcoming students. We have not certified STEMs, but over half of our population is in level 1 and 2. So when we're thinking about service delivery by our ESL teachers, they need to be available to provide 2 to 3 45-minute blocks per day of newcomer plus their ESL content, which is more aligned with those ELA standards, Common Core standards, throughout their day. So it's challenging when you look at the building schedules and just the number of students and the number of students that are receiving those initial levels, those foundational levels. If you don't mind going through. On the other end of that, the exciting celebration part is when students are reclassified. So in Massachusetts, the criteria to exit our program is to have an overall level of a 4.2 and then a composite literacy level of a 3.9 on the Access for ELS assessment. So that occurs January to February every year. We get that data in May. So we're able to go through the reclassification process before students graduate, or not even graduate, but end the school year, especially important at upper middle school and high school for student placement into the following year, so we know what their course selection looks like. Something I just want to point out again, if we look at where that 4.2 falls, that little golden target on the continuum of language development, there's still quite a ways before our students are at full native language equivalency of their monolingual or English-speaking peers. That little Bix and Calc below it is just showing you that basic interpersonal communication, just being able to say, hi, my name is Caitlin, what's the weather like? Students really attain that within the first 1 to 3 years. The academic language, what MCAS is measuring, what our standards are measuring, is 5 to 7 years. The state of Massachusetts has a 6-year guide to say a student who has entered our schools should be exiting a program within 6 years. So it's a tight window. Again, especially when you consider all those other factors. Did the student receive consistent schooling? Are they literate in their first language? All the other things that come into play in addition to learning English. It can be really challenging. And it's really important for us to be mindful of in that inclusive multilingual learner education umbrella. Those first year FELs, we have 20 of them this year, they are still very much developing language. So it is a shared responsibility between what's happening with that content teacher and how they're still scaffolding and making that language accessible. How are they welcoming students who may not have been in these classrooms previously because they were getting ESL instruction, now they're part of it? How do they feel like they are welcomed and belong in there? So just a piece for us to consider on the back end. A lot on how do we provide services, but what are we doing once they exit our services? So with all of that said, I have two quick pieces just to go through of thinking and belonging. What are we doing specifically? Yeah,
Yes, Ms. Coelho,
For that last slide,
yeah,
I'm going back.
for the reclassification.
yep.
You said, by the end of the school
Mike,
year.
is your mic on?
So for the reclassification, you said by the end of the school year, you have them all tested, so you know where they need to go for the next school year?
Yep, so-
So if the child is maybe from a home that's maybe a single-parent home or a low-income home where both parents need to work all summer long, and the child's left with the siblings, and maybe they're not studying or practicing their English language and they're just left to their main house language, is there any concern about them having what we call learning loss over the summer for them to start their new school year?
So it's an interesting question. I think, we certainly promote continued native language use. All the research is showing us that the last thing we want is for our families to stop using their home language with their children. I think about literacy and I think of young children literacy and even our older students. It doesn't necessarily matter what language they're reading in, right? We're assessing, I think, Dr. Trochak, we talk about this a lot, right? We're assessing for MCAS purposes and our benchmarks in English. But it doesn't necessarily honor what a child can do in their native language. They could still be comprehending at the level of 8th grader, but they just can't demonstrate it yet in English because they don't have that language. So it's absolutely a consideration for us. We use that data, so we get it in May, and between May and the end of the school year, the ESL teachers and I look together to see who are kids that we might want to keep on our radar? Who are kids that we would want to invite to? Alan Soames, one of our high school teachers, runs a summer reading workshop for ELs every summer. And so he does the summer reading program with them and ensures that he's structuring it. We build in some other activities. We use the Title III grant for that so that we can continue to support them. At elementary, many of our ELs who are cuspy in terms of their data, right? They're just about there, but we are worried maybe there will be some regression over the summer. They'll be recommended to the summer literacy program. The middle school, they do some one-on-one tutoring with students who have gaps, or they'll do small groups. So we absolutely are using other data in addition to access to decide who might benefit from some summer programming. So school belonging, like Mrs. Brown said, it's not something brand new. It is not unique to ELs, but there are certainly considerations that are essential for us to be thinking about when we think of ELs. So the pieces that are on this particular slide, this comes out of the University of Oregon. It's a recent research study that they had put out, and just thinking about two main areas, looking at social relationship factors as well as system level factors. And when I saw this, it really just connected for me with Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson's opening day keynote speech to our staff, certainly at the leadership retreat as well, thinking about the instructional core, right? So thinking about our teachers, our materials, our students, how are they working together? And how are those pieces then fostering these greater senses of belonging? How are the decisions that we're making in terms of the programming that we do for our ELs, the materials that we bring to our ELs? How are all of these pieces coming together to support that welcoming environment, that sense of belonging for them? So over the past 2 years, our district team, so that's our ESL teachers and myself, have collaborated extensively with our admin, with our school adjustment counselors, with our, I have to look because I don't want to mess it up, the Beverly Public Schools Community Connections counselors and our nurses, all of our SEI nurse teachers, but looking at what are some strengths. We have some really great things that are already happening in our system, and we don't want to discount that. But what are some things that we can then add to that to make sure that we are really attending to the needs of these learners? So there are 3 strategies, if you don't mind going on to the last one, that are part of this particular research study that this group had done. They all align with dimensions that are essential for ELs. So it's thinking about, we want our students to feel welcomed, invited, present, known, accepted, involved, heard, supported, befriended, and needed. So these 3 different strategies, I'm going to just quickly run through what are a couple things we've done and what do we hope to continue, and then I will wrap on it and pass it back over to you. So the first one is looking at instruction that values cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So certainly, again, pulling away from even what our particular ESL teachers have done, our ELE team, our core ELA programs, the piloting that we have done, the implementation of Wit and Wisdom, the implementation this year of Reading Reconsidered, looking at all the STEM instructional materials, the work that both Jennifer Thomas and Jim Rocky have been doing, looking at our ESL curriculum. What is that we're doing specifically at elementary that's aligning with Wit and Wisdom? How are we writing our curriculum, evaluating its effectiveness? And then the placement of students and the instructional grouping. It's not as simple as, well, there's a bunch of level 1, let's put them all here, right? It's looking at what is the impact on that class? What is the impact on everything else that is happening on that team, let's say at the middle school? And how is that student accessible to the ESL teacher and any other services that they may need? So we've made some really nice progress there this year in particular with Reading Reconsidered 6 through 8. In that sense of belonging and really trying to ensure that our intermediate students in particular, in our 6 through 8 group, they've been here for quite a few years now, 4 or 5 years or so. Some of them were coming up on that 6-year cusp. So trying to get them back in the classroom. So as opposed to this standalone ESL class, they're with me and I'm teaching ESL and they go back, they're in the classroom and our ESL teacher is going in. This first module, novel, if you will, is really more of a push-in model with the goal to make it a truly co-taught class. So our students are there, they're participating alongside their peers, and they're really getting access to that. We're onboarding new curriculum for our newcomer and emerging students at middle and high school as well. That will attend to some of those areas. When I looked at those, the student changes that we're seeing, what are maybe some gaps that we're noticing in the academics that students are coming with, their knowledge coming with, that will help to heighten that. In terms of the second strategy, offering learning activities that value students' lives and experiences, meaningful and appropriate scaffolding, that has been something on our radar for some time. It continues to be something on our radar, but really looking at how can our other directors and myself be supporting our administrators, our principals, going in and doing walkthroughs, supporting content level meetings to look at what's working and what's not and what are considerations that we might be missing. We implement frameworks like UDL and PBL, perfect for our Ls. It provides opportunities for authentic voice and choice. And thinking about how does UBD, so that understanding by design, which is what we use in ESL, what's at the end, and what's all the stuff we need to know to get to that, how do those all come together for our students, and layering on the social emotional factors as well. And then the integrating home and school experiences. So I think one thing that we've done really well the past couple of years is continuing to expand our language access program. One thing that is really phenomenal that Alan Soames, again, does at our high school is he offers ongoing adult ESL to the families of our multilingual learners. And so it's building both community for our L families as well as building the language for them. It's an opportunity to go through, hey, here's what school in the U.S. and Beverly looks like, in addition to let's learn some basic English. So this has been super successful. We have families that come every year. They continue to bring new families with them as they come in. So it's something we'll continue to do. Collaborating with our community connections counselors has been essential, especially at our high school, of really identifying what is going on with our students, what is available in our schools within the limits of our cities, and then what do we need access to outside of Beverly, and how do we get it? Because there's certainly needs that we have that are not readily available to us here. And then when we look at our school-home partnerships, we utilize LPAC, family activities like a kindergarten L family night, that we do literacy activities, and really looking at that blueprint for success, which, that's not, the visual's not on there. But it's through DESE. There's 4 different pillars that look at school culture, that look at access to educators. The 4th pillar is a pathway to success in the future. So some of the building blocks of that are thriving in high school, being prepared to be an active civic participant. So looking at what are we doing in elementary that leads to middle and to high school that is going to keep our students in our high school because they feel like they belong, they feel like they have something to contribute, and they can then graduate alongside their peers. So in case you can't sense it, I love our multilingual learners. They are really incredible. They bring so many beautiful things to our city. And so I'm grateful for how responsive this group has been to continuing to increase resources, may it be staffing or time in our day, opening up times to collaborate or resources so that we can really meet their needs so they can achieve it alongside their peers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. I appreciate you coming tonight and sharing that information. I'm going to quickly turn this over to Emma, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about cost calculations, and I will just turn it over to you because we are running short on time.
All right, thank you very much. So we have talked quite a bit this evening about how the funding in our budget shows up in practicality for some of our students, right through grants, through the budget, through supportive programs like our multilingual learner program. And one of the metrics that is used when evaluating how funding is allocated or in support of our students is DESE publishes what's called the per pupil expenditure. And so we thought it might be interesting to talk through that a little bit more tonight. So what the per pupil expenditure is, in its truest essence and form, is a very simple division problem, which is all of the money spent by the school department or on behalf of the school department to make Beverly Public Schools the wonderful place that that is, divided by the number of students that we serve. So there's really two factors, right? We've got how much we spend and how many students that it serves. But it gets a little bit more than that. So I thought we could talk through a little bit of that tonight. So on the expenditure side of the equation, it is, again, all of the funds that are spent to benefit our students. So that is the school committee appropriation budget. That is money spent on the school department's behalf through the city appropriation, whether that's health insurance for retirees, retirement system funding contributions, there's some debt payments, things like that. All of that gets reported, as well as expenditures made through grants and revolving funds. This information is reported to DESE annually in a form that is called the end of year report. It is a comprehensive report that again includes all of these funding sources and all of these expenditures. As a district, we are required to have our end of year report audited annually by an independent audit firm to ensure its integrity, as well as the fact that DESE, when we submit them to our report to them, they go through with a fine-tooth comb, they tick and tie things as well. So they do a deep analysis of our information. There are some expenditures that are made using the appropriated budget, grants, things like that, that do not go, while expenditures made by the department, the school department, do not go into the per pupil expenditure. And those include long-term debt payments, acquisitions, improvements, and replacements of fixed assets. So that might be if we buy a bus or a vehicle, when we install a new playground, when we make capital equipment or technology, which is defined purchases, which are defined by DESE as if they have a per unit cost of more than $5,000 per unit. So an individual computer purchases would not be considered capital, but if you're replacing a server and that costs $20,000, that would be considered capital. Regional school assessments, and then any health services and transportation services provided to non-public schools. Those would be expenditures that could be reported on the end of year report that would not be factored into the per pupil expenditure nominator. Yes, thank you. And so the per pupil expenditure, sort of what influences it, there's a number of drivers, right? Our enrollment is a significant one. Districts with declining enrollment may have a larger per pupil expenditure as a result of economies for scale. For instance, if this is our middle school and we have 500 students in it or 100 students in it, the cost to have the lights on, to heat the building, those are largely fixed costs. Yes, the lights would be turned off in classrooms that didn't have students, but it's largely the same thing. However, if you have fewer students, the resulting equation would result in a larger per pupil expenditure. Not necessarily that there is more money being spent, but just as allocated to each one of the people in the seats, it could be, there would be variance. Also, operational efficiencies. We have made decisions over the course of the year if we keep services in-house or outsourced, right? We have our in-house transportation, which is very cost-effective. We have in-house food services. We have both a in-house custodial that is also a shared consolidated division of the city. And so that is a very, cost-conscious model as opposed to a district that may have a outsourced contract for their custodial or maintenance staff, right? We make decisions about learning model design, class size, special programs. We have a number of wonderful special education programs that are designed to keep Beverly students in Beverly. And really so much more. Each of the things that make Beverly unique and wonderful and make Beverly Public Schools, the Beverly Public Schools that we are proud of, are all sort of parts of the frame that influence how we spend our money. And so there are many, many drivers. And to that extent, it does become difficult to hold a comparison to a neighboring district, as they may have a different number of students. They may have outsourced their transportation or their food services. They may have declining enrollment. They may have made decisions about programming instead of building specialized programs for students who might need specialized program, they may send them out of district. All of those factors influence it. And so when it becomes difficult to find a one-to-one peer to sort of compare ourselves to, I thought it might be helpful to compare ourselves to ourselves. And so on our next slide, we do have a graph that shows over the last 5 years our per pupil FTE, which you can see is the orange line and has remained very steady, where
I'll be right back. Hold, please.
Want me to share it up? Yeah, can you? Yeah. Oh, no, Erin can. No, I'm good. Okay. I'm not signed in, you are. All right. Go ahead, Erin.
and then the green line is our per pupil expenditure, which you can see has grown exponentially. It is also notable too that the per pupil or our pupil FTE is the denominator of this formula, which is really at the heart of what this is. And this is not the same as our SIMS number or enrollment certification that you may be familiar with, but rather it is a statistic that DESE assembles, which is reflective of the fact that our expenditures happen over the course of the year. And so this is sort of their FTE analysis of our enrollment over the course of the year. And so if we had a student who joined us in November and stayed with us through the end of the year, they would be reflected as 8/10. So it is not just point-in-time data, which would be our October 1st SIMS number, which many of us are familiar with. And when you look up on DESE's website, what is the enrollment for Beverly Public Schools, you will get our October 1st SIMS certification number. They actually use a slightly different figure in the calculation of the per pupil expenditure.
I think, can I just also point out, we talk all the time about declining enrollments that are going on across the Commonwealth. That is a very steady, solid line that's going across for Beverly. Our enrollments do not fluctuate. They have not fluctuated in the last 5 years, maybe 15 or 20 students one way or another, and that is, far within a not statistical difference. So it's really important that piece, I think, is something that we know that for surrounding communities, their enrollments, if they're declining, their per pupil number is going up. But ours is going up as we're continuing to have. So I thought that was, of the whole thing, I was very, very impressed with that one. So.
Emma, a quick question about out-of-district placement. I know that's a costly piece for the district, and I'm curious about the numbers. I imagine that's all part of this per pupil expenditure. How has that number changed over time? Has it increased over time? Have we seen more students out of district?
Yeah. So again, stay tuned for the next meeting because you'll see it in a graph. However, I can tell you, because I just put it together, 5 years ago, we had approximately 110 students out of district. We now have averaged for the last 3 years between 65 and 70. And we did that by building in-district programming. So we have a robust program for students on the autism spectrum. We have a program that serves students that have behavioral challenges. We have programs for students with language-based learning disabilities. We have a program at the high school that serves transitioning students into the community. So those programs are really helping us keep Beverly students in Beverly, and that is of all of the components, I think that's probably the one that has the largest dollar amount value. A few months ago to this committee, Bethany was here when Bethany Splansky did her presentation to all of you. She showed you a chart that if you looked at the students, the number of students that we have, if all of the students, that 110 number, let's just say we use that 110 number from, I think it was 2020. If we still had 110 students out of district, we would be spending approximately almost $3 million more for those students than what we had if they had the ones that remained in district. So over time, we've always talked about building in district programming, and in the beginning stages, we would say, well, you're not going to see that cost savings right away. Actually, you have to spend a little more money in order to build those programs, but we did build those programs, and now we do see the benefits of those over time. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
And I think you're a little bit at a disadvantage because, well, it's an advantage and a disadvantage. But we do, in these meetings, invite the different department heads, if you think, or maybe cost center heads.
Like Caitlin Beleza,
For
as a matter of
instance,
fact.
we'll have food services in at least once. We'll have the B&G guys here at least once. We'll have athletics. And so we kind of usually have one guest department per session, so you just missed special ed at the end of last year.
She'll be back.
Yes, Dr. Silva.
The green line, does this reflect the DESI funding?
Yep, that would show us the numbers that would be reported, so.
The green line?
The green line, yep.
But isn't the DESI funding going away?
So this is not our chapter 70, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm asking, because there's going to be there'll be a bump in the per pupil spending because of post-COVID DESI funding. That's going to go away, and there'll be a correction. So I'm wondering, how is that represented here in this?
I think I know what you're talking about ESSER funding, right? And how that infusion of ESSER funding would
Yeah,
have
where is that
elevated
here?
the total expenditures. We talked about that today. Because I think we're pretty mindful of our ESSER funds and we spread them out over the 4-year period, they didn't have that drastic impact. We had approximately $6.2 million in ESSERs 1, 2, and 3 combined, and we utilized them over a 4-year period. So I'm not sure that they'll have a drastic impact, but you're right, there will be, and Emma called it just maybe a little dip, maybe a small correction. There might be, but I think the way that we utilize our ESSER funds will help that from being as drastic as it will in maybe some other communities. So,
Oh, yes, Mr. Manzo, I'm sorry.
So I'm amazed that this is something that the brand-new finance director had to teach someone like me who's been sitting at this table for far too long. A relatively larger per pupil expenditure doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better school system.
Correct.
It could, in fact, it could mean that it's a less efficient school system and that the money's not being well spent. And so thank you for knocking me over the head with that one, because that's something, again, in I don't know, my 20 years here or so, that's a new thing that I had just got like 5 minutes ago.
well,
I think it's important that we remind people that just because there's a bigger number, bigger dollar sign after your district's name doesn't mean that they're actually doing a better job at educating students. In fact, it could mean they're doing a worse job.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so I want to be very mindful of the fact that we're pushing up against our next meeting. And so the next two things on our agendas are revenues and expenses. And many times when we're crunched for time, even though we got our first meeting of 15 more minutes, at the beginning of the year, we're often look at those revenues and go, we haven't collected anything yet because we're so new into the year. And on our expenses, we often look and see, are we concerned that we've overspent on anything? And so I'm simply going to ask you, Emma, are you concerned about either of those things so early in the year?
I am not concerned.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to look around the room. Does anybody else have any questions? We're going to skip actually looking at those documents this evening. They're in your packets. You're always welcome to send questions out of this open meeting. Any other questions? In that case, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Manzo.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Non-debatable. All those in favor? Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in about a month.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Finance and Facilities. Lots of great information coming out of that session. Fortunately, BevCam recorded it. In case you missed it, you can play it back. Today is Wednesday, September 25th already. Oh my goodness, 2024. This is a committee of the whole meeting, and we do have the ability for remote participation. We'll be looking for the mayor to possibly join us. He's at a conference this evening, but would like to join if he is able. So I'll be watching the screen. Oh, your iPad 4. There we go. Thank you so much, Mayor. I was about to boot that person because I wasn't getting a real name. Okay, I'll rename you. So I wanted to say that this meeting is also being recorded, streamed, and broadcast thanks to our friends at BevCam. Viewers are able to join us on channel 6 and HD 1073. Thank you so much, BevCam. And we are using this remote meeting platform based on the permissions granted back in June of 2021 with the Chapter 20 Acts of 2021, which have been extended a few times by our governor and legislature. And that will allow us to continue to use this platform until March 31st, 2025, unless they extend it even further. But also, Beverly does have permission, so long as the chair and quorum are physically present, to allow for participation of members remotely. Tonight is a committee of the whole meeting. As I mentioned, this means that there is not an opportunity for the public to speak to us on this agenda, but that opportunity exists at our next regular school committee meeting on October 9th. You have a variety of ways in which you can provide public comment. You may show up here, Beverly Middle School, around 7:30. We will have a sign-up sheet. And we also have residentvoice@beverlyschools.org as an email address that you can use to either submit a request for a link to join us on this remote platform or to submit your thoughts to us in advance to be read into the record by yours truly. We do ask that you provide your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Joining us today are members of the school committee and various members of the district administration and leadership teams. I will conduct a full roll call for attendance in just a moment, but wish to remind those of you joining us remotely that any audio or video you supply on this platform will become part of this meeting record, and as such, you can use your mute functionality to prevent background noises. Let me now call that roll, and we did hear from Mayor Cahill.
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you, and we can hear you loud and clear. And now we will see your icon as well. And we are joined in person by Ms. Kimberly Coelho. Here. Dr. Kenan Mackenzie DeFranza. Here. Ms. Karen Robinson. Here. Dr. Jeffrey Silva.
Here.
Ms. Lorinda Visnick.
Here.
And for those of you who don't know, I'm Ms. Rachel Abel. We have Superintendent Dr. Sue Chirocek.
Here.
Assistant Superintendent Doc Flaherty. I saw Dr. Morgan here. I think he's just stepped away. We also have our new Director of Finance, Emma Puglisi, and our Executive Director of Information and HR, AKA Operations, okay. I need to update my spreadsheet a little bit. Operations, Erin Brown, thank you. We are joined by Ms. Bethany Splansky, our Director of Special Education and Pupil Personnel Services.
Here.
Thank you. And Caitlin Beleza was with us earlier, but I believe she's left. Okay. Again, one of those great presentations you can catch on the recorded version from BevCam. Thanks for that service. And I saw Mark. Oh, there you are. I'm like looking at your jacket over there. Mr. Mark Thomas from our high school. Thank you.
Here.
Okay. I think that takes attendance. We have our resident rep from Finance and Facilities, Paul Manzo, continuing to join us. Thank you. And there's Dr. Morgan. Okay. Housekeeping out of the way, our first agenda item, I believe, is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to, oh gosh, I always have to pick. Dr. Silva, if you wouldn't mind, since you're right there at the flag. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Next order of business is the approval of our meeting records from our August 28th Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Thank you, Dr. Silva. Were there any edits or corrections that we needed to make to these meeting records before we vote? Not seeing any. We will do a roll call vote since one member is remote. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
thank you. I'm out of order already. Dr. Mackenzie DeFranza. And Karen Robinson,
Yes.
Jeffrey Silva,
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. I should have prepped that before. By 7-0, those meeting records are now approved. And jumping right along, Dr. Churchak, it's time for your superintendent report.
Thank you very much. I have a few items tonight to present. First, an overview of enrollments as of 9/23/24, just an update as to what the enrollments look like in all of the schools. Mark Thomas is here. He's going to talk with us a little bit about what our after dark enrollment looks like this year, both at the Essex North Shore and at Salem High. And he's also going to share with us a little bit of information about an innovation career pathway grant that the high school received. So I would first start off, I know this is Ms. Visnick's favorite form in the world. We call it the little yellow form. It basically breaks down the enrollments by school and grade and program. And so this is sort of the draft that we will use, and that will drive our October 1 submission to DESE. So I do have it broken down just sort of for all of you with a comparative look over the years so that you can see. We welcomed in a very large group of kindergartners this year, 380. They are awesome and amazing, and I have visited all of the schools, and always at the beginning of the year, my first stop is kindergarten because it is a really great place to be. And they are off and running, and we're very excited to have them join us. And then, as you can see, the remainder of the enrollments by grade level, it just sort of aligns to you. We talked about this all along. When I first started here as assistant superintendent, maybe 11 years ago, these were usually in the 300 to 320 range. We are consistently in our elementary schools running 350 and up. Those of you that remember our conversations about the middle school, we were always looking at what those enrollments would be. And as you can see, we have remained steady. So these are the numbers for this year, 1,817 students in our K through 4 programs. At the middle school, again, also, we are, again, remaining, we're actually up a little bit. Remember when we were doing the budget, that grade 4 class that was rising to middle school was rather large, and so they come in at 377, and with the middle school total enrollment looking at 1396. Again, relatively steady over time, statistically speaking. And then finally, our high school numbers, we have, and again, this freshman class, as you can see, as the same as in the past, we had a large number of students that were enrolled at Essex Tech, larger than typical. I actually think, though, that we have leveled out, and I've had that conversation with Mr. Manzo. We are averaging 50 to 60 students, and so we kind of now can budget by budget, plan for that as we go forward. So our freshman class is a little smaller than it was last year, and our high school enrollment is at 1218. Our total district enrollment is at 4620. Again, if you look across we're actually back to the exact number as in FY20. So we are very steady in the way that our enrollments have stayed within the Beverly schools. That was that solid line that was at the bottom of the graph before. We have other enrollments that we watch as well. Preschool, 117 students right now already, and I will tell you that number will grow. We are still doing screenings. We are still enrolling students. I think we made a shift. If you remember, we talked to you all in the spring from half-day to a 2-day, 3-day model. That's been very well received by families in the district. So students, instead of coming for just a morning or an afternoon, come either 2 days, 3 days, or all 5 days. And so we have 117 students right now, and that number we anticipate will grow. Out-of-district placements, we talked a little bit about this in our past meeting. In past years, at one point, we peaked at 110, I think it was, probably in 2019. We are pretty steady now for the last 5 years in the 65 to 70 range. And then finally, our homeschool numbers actually have dipped back down to where they were pre-COVID. We had that real spike when COVID was happening, but we are pretty much back down to that. And we have 79 families that have registered for homeschooling this year. Any questions on enrollments before I turn it over to Mr. Thomas? We'll keep our eye on that. We'll let you know, but this is the basis of our October 1 submission and what we'll be using to have certified for us for the district. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Thomas.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Wanted to talk a little bit about our after-dark programs and their enrollments. Overall, we're trending towards increasing each year. We went from 29 students enrolled between the two programs to this year we're up to 44 altogether. And as you can see, the numbers there. On the left side, Essex Tech, those numbers are up a little bit from last year, and health assisting is typically our highest enrolled shop there. This year, we also were able to add sustainable horticulture and get 4 students in there. Our partnership with Salem High School, which began last year, the automotive technology, as you can see, has really continued to increase in popularity. We're up to 17 students in that shop, and it's been an awesome match for us partnering with Salem High School. And then the medical assisting group has 6 students in it for this year.
Ms. Bisnick?
Can you speak at all to the difference in between the health assisting at Essex Tech versus the medical assisting at Salem High? Is it just a matter of its name, or are they really different programs?
I had a feeling I was going to get this question. I should have wrote down the certifications.
Different.
There's different industry credentials that come out of each, and I'm not going to do it justice by trying to give you the letters that go along with that, but they do lead to different industry credentials at the end of each path.
All right. And then this is the Innovation Career Pathways grant that we were congratulating the high school for receiving this year. We just found out in the past week, so
Right.
Mark's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, first I'd like to compliment the hard work of Julie Ferrara. She's really worked hard to get these grants out and make them complete. Really the person that drives a lot of this, and so we were awarded $75,000 this year for the Innovation Career Pathways grant. This is the implementation grant. We had the planning grant last year. With our designations, we have 3 recognized designations by the state within the school: allied health, business, and environmental and life science. And then we have 2 what I'd call unofficial, not designated by the state yet, with hospitality and education. What that really means, for each pathway, there's a concentration of 20 credits that align to these subject areas. Along with that, there's work that's done with a partnership with Mass Hire. We utilize a program called Pathful, and we kind of mesh that into our advisory that runs twice a week. And that also ranges in students doing mentorship programs where they're able to get out into the community and do kind of like a mini shadow. Both Dr. Missy Orr and Miss Ann Flaherty really drive that end of it, and that we did a pilot for that last year, so we're full implementation on that piece this year, and excited to get people out there. But we have so many great partnerships from our Reach internship program that it's really lined up very well for our students, and they're able to do a lot of those check-ins during our advisory program. And then there's the capstone piece, which is our Reach internship program, which they which they do their internship in the concentration area. As far as the grant itself and what we use the funding for, it ranges from stipends to compensate our coordinators, to dual enrollment courses. We can really offer a wide range of dual enrollment. It also, we can fund our professor for our EMT course that comes in. He's not one of our faculty. He comes in and teaches that course. And then also curriculum supplies, that type of thing, as well as like transportation to different field trips, but also the transportation for the shadowing that we talk about that our students are able to do over the course of the year.
Ms. Visnick?
Sorry, we're way down at the other end. Maybe in a future CISL meeting, we can talk about, again, we have healthcare here, and we could just have a presentation about the three different offerings, ours versus Salem's versus INSAT's, and kind of how they map into what we know we're missing in the workforce right now, right? And so then the options that are available. And I know you and the high school present those things to the eighth graders every year, but for the community to have an idea, right? And we have so many viewers at home on BevCam.
Yeah, that's a great
But
idea.
and for the rest of the committee members as well, I think that would be nice somewhere on as the year goes on. Thank you.
Ms. Robinson?
I don't have my glasses with me. Does that say stipends for students?
No, it does not.
But are they available for students through the Mass Hire
That's
program?
that's not that's not something we put it as part of it. I know those are out there. We build the REACH program, our internship program, on non-paid internships.
Yeah.
So we haven't gone down that pathway, no.
I just want to point out, just as a point of reference for all of you, the word designation has been thrown around. I mean, the being designated as a innovation career pathway high school also opens opportunities for us to apply for many more, much more substantial grants, and looking at how we build off of that. We know this was a first step and a stepping stone to get to some of those, and you may have noticed in some surrounding communities, they might have gotten a grant for particular pathways that they've built and for equipment that they can do it with and all of those things. And so you can't do any of that until you're designated as an innovation career pathway. So that designation for our high school is really important. And we're not talking about it tonight, but as well as our early college designation. So one of the things that over the last 2 years we have been working really hard on is making sure that we are accessing and attaining those designations that are really important to be able to bring some of these more innovative opportunities to our students, so that, because not everybody's looking to do the exact same thing at the end of high school. So I'm just really grateful to the work Julie Ferrara and Mark have done to do that. And it's it's just sort of like a really nice accomplishment to have been able to have received those designations. It takes a lot of work, and so I appreciate the work that was done.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Ms. Visnick?
This is like a wish list thing. As the healthcare option continues to move forward, last year at the MASC conference, there was a school district that had a, I'm not going to do it justice, but my mental model was like when we used to play Operation as kids. So they had a life size you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I do, because notice how I mentioned that the designation opens us up to the opportunity, and that funding, I don't know for sure, but I'm quite sure, came from that next secondary opportunity that opens up to us to be able to enhance your. Sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't have my mic on. But that, I would imagine that opportunity that I just talked about for opening the door to some of the other grants that you aren't able to apply for until you're designated, that would be the type of thing. It brings in equipment, it brings in the opportunity to build like lab-like, now, we still have a little space problem for that, but, it's something that we'll have to look at as we go
So
forward.
I'll try to
The
finish my.
animatronic table, that's,
Yes.
we have our eyes on that as well.
I love that. I love the idea of that.
Yeah, no, we're excited,
And
yeah.
then that particular community was doing like we are with Salem, and it was regional school districts out in the Western Mass. So they were really, every school had something very unique, and they were sharing that way. And it was just I thought it was a fantastic idea. And that particular piece of equipment, because we know that sometimes our children in different classes get to dissect things, but if you're trying to go into health, it's a lot more difficult to get hands-on experience.
So our students that attend the Salem After Dark program actually have access to one of those tables, actually a few of those tables over there. So that's where we first learned about it. I was very jealous, but we're working on it.
Dr. Silva, you have a question?
Can you briefly speak to the the current limitations there are to be able to bring in those types of accessories and tools for lab? I mean, is there space to build this out?
We'd make it work is really what I'd say. We never want to say no to opportunities that could benefit our students. And so from our end, the grants themselves are tricky. You see a dollar amount and you say, wow, that's a lot of money. But there's different, like any grant, there's different ways we have to spend, and we actually tried to get it into this, this particular item into this grant, and it didn't quite fit the criteria. So sometimes there's limitations on what we can use the funding for, but the cutting edge stuff, it's expensive, and trying to balance that all out with giving our students everything they need with everything else that we're trying to spread around. So
Yeah, thank you.
That's it. That's all I have for
Okay.
this evening.
If there's no more questions, we'll move right along. The chair is bringing forward policies for first reading to this committee of the whole. I'm actually a little unclear if we decide tonight that there are no real material edits, if we need a second reading or not, if we just can say reviewed, because the ones that were next on our schedule that Ms. Bergeron reminded me of were in section B. There's BAA, which is the evaluation of school committee operational procedures, BB, which is school committee legal status, and BBA, which is school committee powers and duties. I provided these as a PDF with just a tiny bit of track changes. I compared the versions that we have posted and had most recently adopted that are on our district website to those sample versions that MASC provides to all districts. And the only difference I noted on BAA, Bravo Alpha Alpha, is that they added reviewed date 2022, just to give an indication that it had been recently reviewed by them, but unchanged. And so I would suggest for this one, unless people are bringing to the table any modifications, that we simply mark it as reviewed as of tonight. Open for discussion. I'll just review the other two real quickly. On BB, it's the school committee legal status, and since we have a home rule charter, our version is sourced for Beverly, but the writing is nearly identical to the sample, except that it makes reference to our home rule charter. So this is a statement of code, basically, like how we are represented legally. And then for BBA, Bravo, Bravo, Alpha, again, the MASC sample version is only different in that it was marked as reviewed in 2022, and they added another cross-reference to BDG, which is about the school attorney, which I confirmed we do indeed have in our policy already. And so my recommendation would be No change to the policy, but just into the administrative demarcation at the bottom, adding a review date and adding that cross-reference.
Motion to approve all three as is,
As reviewed?
as reviewed? Sure.
Second.
Okay, now we'll open it up for discussion. Did anyone in their review of these items wish to make any changes?
I have a procedural question.
Sure.
When we mark them as reviewed, they will be put back in with our own review date at the bottom, right? So that change really does,
It's a change, but it's administrative for tracking purposes. It's not a change to the policy, and that's where it was a little fuzzy, because our policy about changing policies is talking about the material changes to the actual policy, not the administrative markings, right?
yeah, I maybe need to get back to the policy
About
primer
policies.
and make that clearer,
Yeah.
right? All right.
But I just wanted to make sure, if there were any suggestions or changes that anyone did feel that they wanted to make, we could call this a first reading and bring them back at the regular meeting. But in my review, everything leans towards just the administrative marking it as reviewed and adding that MASC also reviewed it. I'm not seeing any hands or interest to discuss these any further, so I can state that we have a motion to just approve them as reviewed as of today's date.
So moved.
And did we have a second? I didn't write it down. Okay, thank you, Ken-Ann. Thank you. Okay, I will call the roll. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Ken-Ann McKenzie DeFranza,
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
Jeffrey Silva,
Yes.
Lorinda Bisnick,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. Okay, we will have those marked as reviewed, as noted. Thank you so much. And then,
Want me to
Ms.
share?
Bisnick, yeah, would you like to talk about DJE? It's pretty simple, right?
It is very simple. Do you want me to share?
If you'd like.
Hold, please. Here it comes. There it is. All right, so policy DJE, we talked about it at the end of last year. I was all boo-hooey about it. No offense to Ms. Puglisi, simply 10 or 11 years of working with Ms. Sherburne. It was very difficult to see her leave us and go off into retirement. So this policy says, names an individual who gets to do purchasing for our schools. And we talked a little bit last year about why we didn't just make it a generic job title. And in fact, our charter says that the mayor has to name an individual. And so we approved this policy last year, the end of last year. And I said when we approved it, it would be coming right back to us at the beginning of the school year to change Jean's name out to Emma's name. And so those are the two changes, the totality of the changes. Each place in this file where it used to say Jean Sherburne or Ms. Sherburne, it now says Emma Puglisi or Ms. Puglisi, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so F&F voted that out earlier this evening, and it is my recommendation as the chair of F&F that this committee accept this minor change in this policy as well.
Yeah, so this is a change in the body of the policy. I would note, I think you have a B instead of a G there. You can fix that. I think we do need to bring this one back as a second reading because it's a change in the actual body of the policy. So we will see it on October 9th? 9th, yes.
Awesome.
Were there any other questions? I think that Ms. Visnick gave a good summary. Okay, we'll move right along. For upcoming meetings and dates, the negotiating subcommittee has 3 October dates on its calendar to meet with the BTA for Units A and C collective bargaining. Those are next Thursday, October 3rd, Tuesday, October 15th, and Wednesday, October 30th. And so we do plan to meet with them at, I believe we have to post it for McEwen School next Thursday, since there's a conflict at the high school. So we will be meeting at 3 or 3:30. I'll have to check my own posting. I think we said 3:30. And then meeting with the BTA at 4 p.m. In terms of this group, we have our next meeting on October 9th, as I just mentioned. I want to remind folks that our Student Advisory Council meetings will now be conducted remotely only at 5 p.m. Students believe that they might be able to have better attendance if it's remote, and then that will give members who don't necessarily need to be here for the Standing Committee on Curriculum Instruction and Student Life the opportunity to go about their evening and then join us at 7:30 for our next regular school committee meeting. Okay. With that, that's the end of our Committee of the Whole agenda this evening, with the exception of an executive session. I would like to actually make the motion now that we vote to meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for purposes 7 and 3, and not to return to open session. Purpose 7 will be to review and approve the minutes from our executive session meeting of September 11th, 2024, which were included in your packet. And purpose 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the BTA and AFSCME units, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We have a motion and a second, and it is a roll call vote all the time. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Dr. Mackenzie DeFranza,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Bisnick,
Yes.
and Ms. Abel, yes. 7-0. We are now in open session. The chair states that we will not return to open session, and this is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for reasons 7 and 3. The time is 8:07. I want to thank BevCam so much for their time this evening. We always appreciate it. And one last plug, if you didn't catch the Finance and Facilities meeting, that would be a great opportunity to spend the rest of your evening, because we're ending a little early. Thank you so much.